Welcome to my new video series. In this one, we're going to be taking a look at the fabulous Noise Rene 2. YouTube already has quite a few great tutorials out there on how to use the Rene and what all the various menu options are. I'm not going to cover those. Instead, I want to focus a little bit more on what are some interesting ways that you can use this. So this first video is going to be about using the Rene for implied harmony, and in particular doing an implied chord progression on eurorack without actually having multiple voices. One of the things that Rene allows us to do is we can think about different Z states as different steps in the progression. Let me go ahead and patch up a voice, and I'll show you what I mean. All right, so I've taken the liberty to just patch up a real basic voice here. Let me walk you through what we've got. We have the pitch out of Rene going to the pitch in of 2 HP pluck, and we have the gate out of Rene going to the trigger in of pluck, and the output of pluck is going to go to our output module, which will allow you to hear it. Now, as I mentioned before, Rene has no built-in clock, so we don't hear anything. Before I go on, I want to make one quick mention. These cables that I'm using, by the way, these are right angle cables, and I picked these up from Luigi's Modular Supply. You can check them out, luigismodularsupply.com. This is not a sponsored video. I just think that these cables are cool. One of the things about these is you can see here that the head of these jacks come in 2 different lengths, and that is so that you can stack them together like that, and you can have 2 right next to each other, which I think is pretty neat. He also sells the regular straight jack cable. And each of his cables has little touches. If you can see there, the strain relief on this cable is a bunch of mustaches, and there's an alien head there. Anyways, it's pretty fun. Check them out. I think you might like them. Actually, as of right now, I think there's some sales up on eBay if you want to look at that. Anyways, so we've got this basic patch setup. We don't hear anything. What we need to do is there's a bunch of inputs here on Rene. I'm going to grab a clock signal coming out of my mutant brains here, and I'm going to patch it into the X clock. And we'll get a bunch of random notes. All right, so as I mentioned, this isn't a Rene tutorial, but I do want to explain a couple of features just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So right up here, you can see there's the word access, and if I press these arrow buttons, it's gonna scroll through, and there's different options. For this particular video, the thing we want to talk about is this last one here, which is quant. That is short for quantization. Now, the default state of each channel on each Z-plane, I'll mention what that is later, is going to look like this. So when you first pull it up, you can see that all of these down here are lit, and then up here there's only one lit. Now, here's how to use this. This top row here is the octave range. So this is 1 octave, 2 octave, 3, and 4. If you want something to sound melody-like, 1 is a good pick. If you're doing something more arpeggio-like, 2 is a good pick. If you really want to go wild, you got 3 and 4. Anyways, as you listen to this, you probably notice that it's kind of musical, kind of not. And the reason why is because of this bottom section here. So these 12 push points are all of the pitches in the Western chromatic scale. That sounds like a lot, and if you're not comfortable with music theory, that might be a bit intimidating. But if you look very closely, next to each of these, up in the top corner here, let me point, you can see this one says D, E flat, E, F, G flat, and so on. Basically what we're looking at on this page is any of the push points that are lit are notes that are going to be allowed in our sequence over here set by these knobs. So for example, if I took everything off, we've limited ourselves to C. And you remember I said that this is the octave. Okay. So, it turns out that this is actually a really cool way of dealing with this problem. A lot of sequencers will let you pick a scale, and you'll pick major or minor or blues or pentatonic or whatever it is that you want. And Rene instead says, here's the 12 pitches in Western chromatic. You pick the ones that you want, and it's really up to you. So there's a couple of ways to use this. One way, obviously, is that we could just pick a scale that we are familiar with. So, for example, if we were going to do E major, we would start with E, and as long as you know the pattern, you can punch it in. So major is whole step, half step, whole step, half step? I might have messed that up. So there, you can hear we are getting a random sequence in, well, random in the sense of I turn the knobs in E major. So that is cool and all, but I discovered that there is an even more interesting use of this, which is instead of picking all of the notes in the E major scale, what if we only picked the notes that were in the E major chord? So, just in case you don't have every chord memorized, let me show you something. A helpful resource that I use is I have this book. Obviously, all of this information you can look up online, but I think that it is very handy to just be able to turn to a key and to be able to see information about it, to see what the triads are, to be able to quickly say, okay, that's root, that's fourth, that's fifth, and so on. This is a guide that helps me. Of course, you can look this up on the internet for free. I find that just having it in book form right next to where I'm working is way more convenient than fiddling with the device and risk being distracted by some notification. So to keep things simple, I went ahead and cleared everything out, and I'm going to use C major as that's the one that most people are familiar with and that I am most confident that I will not mess up. So the root chord in the key of C, again, you can look all this up online, is going to be C major. So when we choose which notes are allowed, we choose only the pitches that are in that chord. So that would be C, E, and G. Something else that we could do if we wanted to be clever is we could also include the seventh. Or we could include the ninth. And all of those sound pretty nice together. Just to keep it simple though, I'm going to leave it on just the pitches in the triad. So this alone is kind of interesting, but there is actually a second thing that we can do here. It turns out that one of the really cool features of Rene is that all of these settings are captured into one plane. That's kind of makenoise's terms. Anyways, this is one snapshot in time, and what we can do is we can have another configuration of notes, and then we can move back and forth between them. So to access that, which is referred to as the Z plane, we're going to use two fingers and we're going to press both the left and the right buttons up here. You can see that we've been operating on this one here. So if we go to the next one, you can hear we're back to the chromatic scale. Let's do a chord progression here. So what's a popular one? How about 1, 4, 5? So the 4 in C major would be F, so that would be F, A, D. All right, perfect. Okay, and then this one here is going to be our 5, and the 5th is going to be G major, so we'll do, it's G, B, D. So now, here's the cool thing. We know that this is 1, this is 4, and this is 5. By the way, it can kind of be a little bit of a bother that all these other ones are here. I'll talk about that in a second. But if we move through these states in order, what's going to happen is it's like we're changing quantization settings for whatever the knob state is. Do you hear that? Now, obviously, as you probably noticed, when I hit it, if I don't get it right in time, it kind of glides and jumps. So there's a neat feature, which is not only can we have our chord progression, but we can eat our cake too. Okay, so I've added a cable here. So we have a quarter note output coming into the Noise Engineering bin seek. I'm using this really as a clock divider. I'll show you in a second. We can do some more interesting things with this. Anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to take the output of this, and you can see that for each quarter note, we're going to go through this, and because there's 8, that means that this is effectively representing 2 bars of time, these 8 switches. Now we can take the output here, and I'm going to patch it into the Zmod input, and every time Zmod gets a trigger, it's going to change our state, so have a listen. So you noticed we went to a thing that we didn't want. So there's a solution for this. If you hold left, the left arrow, anyone you touch will be taken out of the rotation. All right, so let me put that back in. Off camera, I'm playing with this wonderful Maris Mercury 7, which is why the reverb is changing. We can build up a swell to come back to the tonic. Cool, so what we have now is we have effectively an implied chord progression happening because we're hitting C, which is the 1, F, which is the 4, and G major, which is the 5. And even though we have one voice happening and we're playing different pitches at a time, we're implying a harmony by only playing the pitches that are in those chords. So as you might imagine, we can do other cool stuff with this. I mean, I could start messing around with changing it more often. We could speed up the tempo. So anyways, that's the basic idea. I hope you have fun with this. I'm gonna play around for a few more minutes. Thanks, everyone.